This happened to me back in late November of 2024 when I was 18. I was at the Walden Galleria Mall in Buffalo doing some early Christmas shopping for my family. I love getting it done early. The lights, the decorations, the music, the whole holiday energy makes it feel magical. By that point, I already had a few shopping bags with me. I'd been to Victoria's Secret, Zara, and Sephora. I got gifts for my family, and of course, a few things for myself. After a few hours, I decided to take a break near the big Christmas tree in the center of the mall. It wasn't empty, but it was getting quieter as the evening went on. That's when an older man sat down next to me. He cracked a light-hearted joke, and I laughed politely. He seemed friendly, probably in his 60s, with kind eyes and a white beard. He even joked that he looked like a skinny Santa Claus. We chatted briefly. He mentioned he'd been coming to this mall since it first opened and hoped it would never close. Then he said something unexpected, that I reminded him of his daughter, and showed me a photo on his phone. The strange part was, the girl in the photo didn't look like me at all, or like him. She looked around my age, though, about 18. Something about it made me uneasy, so I smiled, excused myself, and left. I didn't think much of it afterward, just an odd encounter. I headed to my car and started the 10-minute drive home. My brother and I were staying at one of my family's houses at the time. It was a quiet Thursday night, and he was out with friends from the University of Buffalo. As I turned into our cul-de-sac, my phone buzzed. AirTag found moving with you. My stomach dropped. I kept driving around the block, trying to figure out what was happening. I followed the phone's instructions to make the AirTag beep, expecting to hear it outside the car. But the sound came from inside, from one of my shopping bags. When I looked through them, I found a small white AirTag hidden inside. My hands were shaking. I quickly tossed it out the window in a well-lit area and drove home, trying to calm down. At home, I locked all the doors and called my brother Cody. He told me to stay inside, keep the lights on, and call if anything felt off. I tried distracting myself with TV, telling myself it was all over. Then, the doorbell rang. My heart sank. A few seconds later, there were 3 knocks. I froze, listening. Then a man's voice called out from the porch, "Hey, Ashley, I think you might have my AirTag." It was the same voice from the mall. He said he must have dropped it in my bag by accident, but I knew that wasn't true. My mind raced. If the AirTag wasn't with me anymore, why was he here? I called Cody again. At first, he thought I was kidding, until he heard the panic in my voice. He said he was already heading home and told me to stay locked inside. When I peeked toward the front door, the man was gone. Relief washed over me. Maybe he'd realized he was at the wrong place. But a few minutes later, movement caught my eye outside the window. At first, I thought it was just my imagination, a passing shadow, a tree moving in the wind. But then, a soft voice came from outside the glass, low, calm, familiar. I love it when they play dumb. My heart pounded. I looked toward the window, and there he was, the same man from the mall, standing just beyond the glass, watching. He smiled when our eyes met, then tapped lightly on the window. My breath caught. I stumbled backward and grabbed my phone. I called Cody again, barely able to speak. He told me to stay put and dial the emergency services right away. I did, hands trembling. The man didn't move. He just stood there, silent. It felt like time stopped. I left the living room and went into the small office. The only room without windows. I locked the door and stayed on the line with the dispatcher until I heard Cody's car pulling up outside. He rushed in, calling my name. I ran out to him, overwhelmed with relief. But when we checked the windows again, the man was gone. The police arrived soon after. They searched the area but found nothing. No footprints, no signs of anyone nearby. One of the officers said AirTag cases can be tricky, but gave me a report number and told me to contact Apple about tracing the device. I did that the next day, though the process took longer than I expected. Weeks passed with no updates, no new sightings, no messages, nothing. Eventually, I started to believe it was over. Maybe he realized someone else had gotten involved and decided to leave it alone. But I still think about that photo he showed me. The girl he said was his daughter. She looked young, around my age. Sometimes I wonder who she really was, and on quiet nights I still check my phone just to make sure no new AirTags are moving with me. At first, I thought it was a mistake. Maybe someone nearby dropped their keys, or maybe it was just a glitch. But when I opened the notification, my heart sank. The app said the AirTag had been moving with me for over an hour. That meant it had been in my car the entire time. I pulled over and searched everywhere, under the seats, the glove box, even the trunk. But there was nothing. No AirTag, no strange items. And that's when the realization hit me. Someone had hidden it. Someone was following my movements. They knew where I went, where I lived. And that thought alone made my chest tighten. I tried to stay calm, but my hands wouldn't stop shaking. I had no choice but to drive home, which meant I could have been leading whoever it was straight to my apartment. When I got there, I checked every corner of my car again. Still nothing. The app insisted it was nearby, but I couldn't find it. I thought about calling the police, but what could I even show them? An invisible tracker? No proof? No suspect? Nothing? So I told myself to breathe, to think rationally. My apartment complex had cameras, a gate, and plenty of security. I told myself I was safe. At least that's what I tried to believe, because whoever owned that AirTag already knew my location, and that wasn't something anyone could undo overnight. I tried to move on. The next morning, I went to work as usual. The same notification popped up again when I parked, but I brushed it off. Still, my mind kept circling back to that tiny white tracker. That evening, I decided I had to find it once and for all. I spent nearly an hour searching through my car, checking every tiny gap, every seam, even places I'd already searched the night before. Then when I reached behind the backseat cushion, my fingers brushed against something hard. My breath caught. I already knew what it was. I pulled it out carefully. A white AirTag. I carried it inside, hands trembling. I didn't want to destroy it. It could be evidence, but I couldn't leave it active either. So I removed the battery. The thought that someone had been tracking me for days made me feel exposed in a way I'd never experienced before. That night, lying in bed, I couldn't stop wondering who would do something like that. I thought about everyone I knew, old friends, ex-co-workers, but no one seemed likely. The next evening, after a long day at work, I went to unlock my apartment door and froze. It was already open. Prints, no damage, no clear signs of how it had happened. I showed them the AirTag notifications and explained everything. They asked if I had any history with unwanted attention or anyone who might have tried to contact me recently. but I didn't. Eventually, things calmed down. Whoever was behind it must have realized the police were involved. Still, I moved out not long after, just to be safe. Thankfully, I don't think they followed me. But it still unsettles me that someone had not only tracked my every move, but somehow entered my apartment. The strangest part? The door was never broken. It was simply unlocked. With a key. A key no one else should have had. Music transition. This next story happened a few years ago. I'll stay anonymous for reasons that'll soon make sense. I'm from a quiet suburb, and what I'm about to describe took place over several months. It nearly unraveled my entire sense of reality. This wasn't just unsettling, it was overwhelming. There were nights I'd lie awake, staring at the ceiling, wondering if I was imagining it all. It started shortly after a difficult breakup. Let's just call her Devon. I won't get into details, but it didn't end smoothly. I wasn't heartbroken, just drained. Devon could be unpredictable, and parting ways felt like the right decision. A few weeks later, I went to a party at my friend Zinan's house. He's the type who hosts huge gatherings, big property, loud music, too many people. Everyone in our area knew him. That night, I ran into one of Devon's old friends. Let's call her Taylor. She'd always been distant before, but that night, she was suddenly very friendly, maybe too friendly. It felt strange at first, but after a few drinks, I stopped overthinking it. We ended up spending some time together upstairs. When I got up to leave later, I realized something was missing. My wallet. It wasn't in my jacket or my jeans. Taylor was gone, already back downstairs, talking to other people. I searched the room, but couldn't find it. My phone was still in my hand, but I couldn't call her. I was still blocked from the breakup. So I went home, annoyed, but not panicked. I figured I'd just misplaced it. The next morning, I remembered I had an AirTag in that wallet. I checked the location. It was active. The tracker showed my wallet at a nearby gym. I decided to drive there and see if someone had turned it in. But just as I arrived, the AirTag suddenly went offline. The timing was unsettling. I went inside anyway, but the staff wouldn't let me search without a membership. So I looked around from the outside, hoping to spot something familiar through the windows. No luck. No Taylor, no Devon, no wallet. I drove home frustrated, trying to focus on work instead. The rest of the day passed quietly until noon the next day, when the AirTag pinged again. This time it was at a small park nearby. I grabbed my keys, got in the car, and headed there, hoping I'd finally find out who had it, or at least how it ended up in someone else's hands. But as soon as I stepped out of my car, the signal vanished again. That's when I knew it wasn't random. Someone was controlling this. There were a few people scattered around the park. Parents, joggers, a couple on a bench. But no one I recognized. I walked in circles, pretending to check my phone, scanning faces for any hint of familiarity. Nothing. When I finally gave up and headed back to my car, I felt that heavy, crawling sensation deep in my stomach. The kind that comes when you just know you're being watched. It wasn't paranoia. It felt deliberate. Whoever it was knew exactly when to make the AirTag go dark. That was the first moment I realized something was seriously wrong. Later that night, I researched how AirTags work and learned that whoever had my wallet could easily remove and replace the battery, taking it offline whenever they wanted. That meant someone was intentionally keeping me in the dark. I tried to convince myself to ignore it. I had work, responsibilities, a life outside this obsession. For a few days, I did my best to move on, but then everything changed. One night, just as I was drifting off to sleep, a loud crash jolted me awake, my chest locked up. I froze, barely breathing, listening hard. It sounded like something breaking downstairs. For a few seconds, I couldn't move. The fear was unlike anything I'd felt before. That sense that something was happening in your home, and you were completely powerless to stop it. I locked my bedroom door, grabbed my phone, and called for help. I waited quietly until the police arrived. They checked the entire house, but whoever had been inside was gone. A few of my things were missing. Some electronics, my laptop, and random personal items. They took my statement and promised to investigate, but I didn't have much to offer. There were no witnesses, no leads. Weeks went by. Every now and then, I'd open the AirTag app, half out of habit, and every time it was still offline. Until one random night, it wasn't. The signal came from a bar I'd been to before. Despite every instinct telling me not to, I drove there. The moment I stepped out of my car, the signal disappeared again. That pattern, appearing and vanishing right when I showed up, it pushed me past my breaking point. I started asking people if they'd seen my wallet, demanding answers from strangers who just stared back in confusion. Eventually, security asked me to leave. I don't blame them. I was frustrated, exhausted, and humiliated. Still, I couldn't shake the obsession. It happened again, at a cafe, in broad daylight. Same pattern. The AirTag would reappear, then vanish the moment I got close. That was when I decided to stop looking for good. But about a week later, everything collapsed. One morning, as I was getting ready for work, I heard a knock at the door. It was the police. They had a warrant, not just to search my home, but to arrest me for something I didn't understand. They said I was being investigated for stalking. I was in disbelief. I told them there had to be a mistake, but they were calm, methodical, and professional. They had paperwork. They had evidence. They said they were looking for a journal hidden in one of my drawers, something that supposedly contained disturbing notes about my ex, Devon. I told them there was no such thing, but they searched anyway. And when they came out of my room holding a small, leather-bound book, my heart nearly stopped. I'd never seen it before. Before I could even process what was happening, I was being escorted outside. Hands behind my back, my neighbors watching from their windows. In that moment, it felt like my entire life was ending. The weeks that followed were unbearable. Devon had built an entire case with pictures, screenshots, and messages that seemed to prove I'd been following her. There were photos of me at the gym, at the park, at random places I'd visited after tracking that AirTag. It all fit the story too perfectly. She even had messages that looked like they came from my phone, ones that painted me as obsessive and unhinged, while she appeared frightened and desperate. According to her, I'd been harassing her for weeks.